I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 206th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss college student loan forgiveness. Answer the question, is it the government's role to essentially pay for college tuition? Our panel begins today with Tom Finley, retired Vice President of Human Resources Development at Rubbermaid Incorporated. Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and faculty of Wadsworth High School. Bryan Laubaugh is not with us today and unfortunately had a meeting come up at the last hour. And Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Tom, I think everyone would agree that it's a nice thing for the federal government to pay off student loans and allow college graduates to begin their life debt-free. However, we have to ask, is it a good policy overall?
John, the first thing that came to mind when I read your comments, the introductory information, was that an old adage, give someone something for nothing and you get it good for nothing. The forgiveness of loans, and that falls into that category very quickly for me. Maybe it's the bias. My wife and I talked about this. We both paid our way, earned our way through college with degrees without the government. So I don't think that anywhere in the Constitution is it defining the role of government to educate in the way of college its citizens. So how it enters into the budgets and gets to the tremendous debt that we now see into the trillions, I don't know. But one thing occurs to me: when there are elections going on, it's very good rhetoric to say, I don't think 10,000 is enough. I think it ought to be 50,000. And I don't know if that's for buying votes or not, but it sure smacks of it. So I do not agree at all with the government being involved in paying for college education.
Patty, what are your thoughts?
I've been reading so much about this, considering the fact that a bill for this was it wasn't a bill, but Biden had made the decree yesterday that he was going to make a $10,000 payment or relief of $10,000 in debt for some students that have loan built up. They do have to have under $120,000 in income or $250,000 for a family. It also offers up to $20,000 of relief debt for Pell Grant students, which, if you are familiar with Pell Grants, they are given to those that really cannot afford to go to school, and Pell Grants are not repaid. The idea with this is that if it is a Pell Grant student, they are not coming from a family with a lot of money. They do not have a lot of resources themselves, and this provides income for them. In looking at this, I understand the concern with the debt and the increase of the debt, because it's expected to cost $300 billion, I believe, for this project to go through. I find it interesting that's coming from Republicans who, the entire while that Trump was in office, they had no concern for rising debt. It is only when a Democrat that's in office that they are concerned with it. I have concern with debt as well. The thing is, however, the idea behind this is that if you start to relieve this debt, that it will put more money into the hands of those people that have this huge college debt. They will be able to use it to purchase a home or to start a new business or just to provide for their families. There are over 43 million people in the United States that will benefit from this. When we say that, I know Tom mentioned the fact that he went through school and didn't pay off, paid and worked off himself. I agree. I was able to go through quite easily with my father, put 5 kids through college and was able to do this. The thing is, college used to be a lot more affordable. When I first started college, the cost was $13 a credit hour. That was for a semester. That cost has increased by at least 25 times since the time that I first started college. Yes, when I was in school, you could work and go to college and it would pay for it. It doesn't do that because while costs have increased 25 times, wages have only increased about 5 times as much. So you're out in the cold. It's estimated now that most students graduate with over $45,000 in debt, which is taking them years and years and years to pay off. There has to be something done for this. I've heard the complaint or the concern that just because only certain people are getting this help, and it's only those that have gone to college instead of getting a job and working. Well, that's true, but the person is not going out and partying on this money and this debt. What they're doing is they're going to school, they're earning a degree, and they're becoming educated. And I think one of the goals for all of us is to have, or should be, to have an educated populace. I mean, this is very, very important that people do become educated when they can. For those, I've heard that, people that paid off their debt are going to feel like suckers. Well, that doesn't mean you never start doing it. When the GI Bill was put into place, and it was good. I mean, that is a fantastic bill and provides free college for all of those that have served their country. Great idea. But you didn't see all these people coming up and saying, hey, but when I was in the service, I had to pay for my own college. So you shouldn't afford this privilege to anyone else in the future ever. I think that's a bad excuse. And, I don't like to hear that, well, you didn't do it for me, so I'm not going to do it for you. Kind of sits rather poorly with me. I look at, again, my biggest thing actually, though, is just simply the cost of a college education now. Something has to be addressed to bring that cost down. Just for tuition at Akron or Kent State, it costs close to $12,000 a year. Now, that's not including room or board or the cost of your books or anything of that sort. If you want to go to a school like John Carroll, it's going to cost you $45,000 a year. If you want to go to Mount Union, it's going to cost you around $35,000. And again, that's without room and board and the cost of books. These costs are astronomical. And with so many professions requiring college degrees, for example, I was a teacher. Teachers now are required to get a master's degree. And trust me, on the salary that teachers get, paying off those college loans are going to take till they're in their 40s or 50s. And it shouldn't be that way.
Wasn't there some kind of a specialty for school teachers and healthcare workers?
When? Not that I know of.
Okay, well, I'll have to think that through.
During the pandemic, they did allow you to not pay off student debts. It didn't erase them, didn't make them disappear.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, part of the bill that Biden has put in says that they won't resume paying of debts until December 31st. And at that time, you will only have to pay 5% of what your income is, as opposed to 10%, which was what it used to be.
Yeah. Does it bother you at all that the average taxpayer is going to have to pay $2,000 over the life of this?
I've heard that, but it's not like I'm going to have to reach in my pocket and pull out $2,000 more and give it to you. What that's based on is
I
they're
bet you I
saying,
could make it sound that way in a campaign speech, though.
well, you could, but it would be wrong to do that.
That doesn't matter.
One thing I'd like to interject at this point is the universities have never been known for good, efficient management. They are always moving their costs and putting it into the tuition.
Yeah.
And no other enterprise can do that kind of thing. So there is that.
I want to address that after we've heard from Ron, because Bryan made a comment to me in an email that I want to share with you. But Ron, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've learned a couple of interesting things about the presidential proposal from reading a BBC article. It was surprisingly, these days, surprisingly neutral. But 1/5 of people owe less than $10,000. About a third people have the debt but didn't graduate, so they don't have the degree. So that's kind of the worst of, as Diane said, the worst of both worlds there. I saw a note from good old Bernie Sanders that these PPP loans that personal protective things that industries got during the pandemic, a lot of those loans were forgiven as well. And those averaged, I don't know what the total was, but the average was, so Bernie says, $95,700. Those loans were forgiven. So, maybe
I guess I don't know what you're talking about, Ron. What are PPP
loans? These are personal protective things they got to buy, to supply masks, whatnot. Very
That's a lot of masks.
Yeah, well, there were other things involved with that. But anyway, what do I think about it? Well, I can kind of tie the argument that it's an investment in people's futures. There was a posting just this morning. I just finished reading a guy who's talking about he was had a student loan, and he says, you have to accept that this is the loan industry, and he pointed out how that his student loan just ballooned because of the fairly high interest rates that he had to pay, and so he tried to manage it, and he said it certainly would have helped him. He would still have his debt, but it was coming too late to help him. He wished he would have had it a little bit sooner, and all that's good. And so, is it proper for the government to do this? In some sense, yes, it is. Again, I think it's probably an investment in folks' future. Investment in the future of the country. If you, I'm a believer in higher education. Certainly, these days, if I were a young person, I'd have to think really hard about trying to go to college. As Patty mentioned, in my day, I went to a liberal arts college, not a state-supported school at all, and I think the first year it cost a total of $1,000 for that room, board, and tuition, and it went up to, in 4 years, went up to a whopping about $1,500. I remember my father's face when I told him that I'd been accepted to grad school, and I says, "Dad, they're going to pay me." I had an assistantship; they were going to pay me to go to school, so it certainly relieved him.
Yeah.
And he was a working man, worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad at the time in the early late 50s. The railroads were suffering greatly from the highway systems, and he was working maybe 6 months out of the year. The rest of the time he was on relief. So it was a tough slog for them. And I had grants and scholarships and summer jobs and helped defray all that, but it couldn't do it today, I'm sure. So I can see that it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because I think the precedent is here in helping the government is, should the government pay for this? The government pays for a lot of things that I think are good, a lot of things that aren't very good.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and you all know what those are. But so it's a mixed bag. I think we'll see some relief, and I think we should.
Yeah.
I wonder what it costs the United States government to administer a scholarship program.
You can bet that it costs more than it should, or more than it should.
Yeah.
But, my wife reminded me this morning that we paid for 4 college educations. Well, we didn't borrow any money; we just sort of pay it as you go for all of our kids. And my parents paid, well, not for mine, but my sister's educations. But it never occurred to me to feel put upon about that. That was just kind of what we expected. The other thing that occurs to me is I think it's a bad precedent to let young people know you don't have to pay your debts. That the whole idea of free enterprise is built on borrowing money and repaying it. The whole infrastructure of the private enterprise in this country was built on borrowed money, and it was all repaid. It's just part of our DNA to repay your debts. But we're now teaching a class of young people that's not necessary anymore. I'm wondering how long it will be before, there are a lot of government-backed home mortgages out there, and I'm sure there's some people that have trouble paying their house payment. Are we to expect the government to come in and take care of that for everybody?
Part of the thing is, though, the average student graduates with over $45,000 in debt.
That's exactly right. Yes.
And from college, $10,000 isn't going to wipe away all of their debt.
No,
they're still going to have debt. So they will learn that idea of having to make payments.
Yes.
I'm looking at, my son had some college debt. He's paid it off. His wife has paid it off. Her debt that she had, my daughter's is paid off. And it took them quite a while to do that. And also, again, buy a home and raise a family is extremely difficult, primarily because the cost of education is completely out of control.
But we know these things. Why do we set the expectation there's something for nothing? And I'm saying that because of the huge amount of forgiveness says those folks accepted and did not have responsibility for their education. Now, the people who paid it off did. That was fine and expected, but there's a big if question that's related to if it gets paid off. That number of people who are not haven't learned something.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they've learned something, it was the wrong thing. You get something for nothing.
Bryan pointed out something that I thought was kind of interesting. In addition to the question about why has college education become so darned expensive, is the question of the growing amount of endowments that large universities have. And Bryan's feeling was, if we're going to be paying off student debt, why not do it with the endowments of the universities where they attend?
I know that's the case with some of, like Harvard. The Ivy League schools have huge endowments. I don't know that that's the case with state universities, with private institutions.
Well, let's pretend
I don't know how that works, that you could make them use their endowments and so forth, when it is a private institution.
Well, you put pressure on them like we do with everything else.
And perhaps it's not a federal government. If we want contributions to come from any place, perhaps it's in the realm of the states providing that to their universities and not the federal government.
Well, Ohio has a program, and many students are taking advantage of it, where as a high school senior, and I think as a junior, you can take college credit. It counts as both high school and college credit.
Yeah.
And you don't pay anything for it. You get your college credits for free. Mm-hmm. And when I was still teaching, there were very few students taking advantage of that. I've been retired for 15 years, And now there is a huge portion of students because you can get basically a full year of college paid for by the state government
There we
by
go.
taking those classes in high school. My big concern with that always, however, was that seniors, and in case of juniors, we're losing the experience of being in the high school for that year. And I'd like to see them get fully baked before they go to college. And I'm not sure they are at the younger age. But it is it is an answer to some of the costs here within the state.
Well, this is a question coming from my own ignorance, and that is the Constitution of the United States government. Where in that Constitution is there a place in that Constitution that suggests or demands that the government be actively involved in a program like scholarships?
There isn't in the Constitution. And the basis for the for this act by Biden has been the HEROES Act, which was passed after 9/11, which allowed the government to spend money, give money to individuals in the event of a war, in the event of a pandemic, in the event of an emergency. And that's what the basis is now. That's, I'm sure, is going to be challenged in court and could go all the way to the Supreme Court before it's used. But that is the basis for the act of relieving college loans right now.
One of the things that troubles me is the fact that if I had college debt and I only had a meager salary of $124,000 a year, the government would be paying off part of my debt for me. 124,000. Now, it's been a long time since I worked for a salary, but that was a big one. And I think it seems to me that 124 or 249,000 in family income seems like an awful lot of money to be forgiven a debt. I don't know how you all feel about that, but that seems like a pretty high bar.
I thought the same thing, John. I thought it might have been lower, but I think they were trying to address more people that have the debt and are still having difficulty paying it off. Very honestly, if you're making $125,000, it's not all that much. I mean, if you're trying to buy a home, when you look at the prices of homes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, a few years ago, it was a lot.
Yeah. It was a lot when, I was teaching. Nobody made $125,000.
The end of my career, I made less than that per year.
Yeah. I mean, I made a lot less than that. So,
well, I think that maybe we're headed down a path here that it is setting a precedent for all kinds of harmful things in the future. Where do we stop this? I mean, are we only applying this to the current crop of people who are going to vote in the next election, or is this going to go on forever? What happens if I wanted to start college this fall and borrow money? Can I depend on that to be repaid, or should I even be thinking that way?
I think it's a one-time deal. That's not to say that it wouldn't come up again.
Well, then the question of fairness pops up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and there are those that want more money. I mean, Elizabeth Warren was campaigning for $50,000 or all of it to be paid, I believe. Bernie Sanders did the same thing. Unless they were president, I don't see that happening.
Chuck Schumer wants to go 50,000.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. But there are those. I believe Tim Ryan who's running for Senate from Ohio, is opposed to the bill.
Yes.
So,
which is a pleasant surprise. But then again, he's got JB, what's his name?
JD Vance.
Breathing down his neck, and that it's going to be interesting to see what kind of shenanigans take place between now and the midterms. And I think it's going to be pretty bad. But
I just gave a eulogy at my brother's funeral. And the centerpiece of that eulogy was family values and how they have been transferred. And I thought of that this morning when I looked at this topic, and I realized that my children got to school, finished their degree, and we helped some. They all graduated, et cetera, et cetera. I talked to my great-grandchildren, or to my grandchildren, and their children. They have already established funds and the process of paying for their college education. I don't know why we have to even think that our government should be involved in the process of fulfilling the business of educating people in college.
I want to bring up Tom's son Patrick for just the moment we've got left. I was so impressed with Patrick when he went to college. He went to Akron U, and he decided very quickly he was renting a room in a house, and it would be a whole lot, he'd be a lot farther ahead if he bought the house. And he not only bought the house, but then there was another landlord on the campus that had a group of houses to sell. And Patrick bought them all. I think it was 7 houses. And by the time he graduated, he owned what, 22 houses on the campus at Akron U? Now that's an impressive way to get through school. I've always been impressed by that. Well, thank you very much, folks. It's been a good topic, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
It'll be interesting.
Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.